Luca, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here.
Call Me By Your Name is based on a 2007 book of the same name by André Aciman. When you read this book, what appealed to you about the story?
Well, I read the book as a reader. I haven't read the book with the intention of being the director of it. When I read it in the first place, I've been given the book by the producers, Peter Spears and Howard Roseman, who were trying to make this movie on a different ground with a different director and script. And because the book is set in Italy, they wanted me to help them understand the geography of the action. And basically one thing led to another, and during a span of time that comes from 2008 and now, I ended up making the film.
What is it about first love that makes such a fertile ground for filmmaking?
Well, I think for me, at least, it has to do with the possibility of showing a behavior that is unbiased, uncynical. I like behavior in general. I like to see people behaving. And the allure of the first love is such of something still uncorrupted by a cultural cynicism, I would say. Yeah.
We were talking about that before we came in, that it seems like the love we call true love is the love that happens in our late 20s, early 30s, typically with the person we stay with. However, the art that we love is typically about young love.
Well, I think that is about surviving in a way. You have to find a way to establish your scheme of survival. And when you arrive in the early 30s, you feel that you need to settle. You don't have that urgency when you're very young, so you have all the passion to consume yourself upon.
And we tend to disparage young love, but really it can be quite deep.
It is quite deep.
Yeah.
It is quite deep. I think, like we're made of actions, and we are made of actions that we don't think we are making. Like I like the politics of the id and the politics of the ego as well, meaning that I think that it's interesting to see what you decide to do, and also it's interesting to see what you don't control doing yourself.
This film is set in northern Italy. That's where you're from. That's where you're familiar with. Is there any of you in this film?
Actually, I'm not from northern Italy. I am half Italian and half Algerian. I grew up in Ethiopia. My father is Sicilian. I spent 15 years in Palermo. So northern Italy, which is quite different from south of Italy, also for the non-Italians.
But you live there.
But I live there, and the novel is set in Liguria by the sea, and I thought it was better for me to soak the story in a place that I felt familiar on one hand, and with less the cliche of the sea as the horizon that you can be lost into. It also for me was a sort of exercise. I thought that I was going to make the movie if I could make the movie in a very light, unobtrusive way, and the fact of making it in my hometown.
But do we see any of your own personal experiences in this film at all?
As much as we see your own experience, I would say.
How do you mean?
I think I tend to make movies that can be paradigmatic to our experience as human beings. And this sounds horrendously pompous, and I apologize to the listener for what you just said.
No, I don't think it is at all. I think it's beautiful.
It's an attempt. I try to make something that people can relate, whatever is the geography they come from.
One of the moments you really relate to is Oliver and Elio's first kiss and how long it takes to get there. Was that a challenge as a director to stretch that out as long as you could?
I think it was natural by the unfolding of the actions. And, in a script, you can have a line saying, they walk into the square. Then the walking into the square becomes like a 2-minute scene. So, it depends on how the pace you give by the way of shooting the movie that elongates the moment. In general, I like to hold things. I think it's better to savor the possibility of the thing than the thing in itself.
Especially then. I mean, going into this film blind as I did, I really didn't know if it was going to come at all.
Yeah, But that's great. That's cool.
I'm glad.
Yeah, yeah.
I mentioned earlier that Call Me By Your Name takes place in northern Italy. It's so beautiful. It's not a place I've ever been before, but it seemed in the film that the setting seemed sexual. The peaches ripening, the pool, the sun hitting against these warm bodies. Was that intentional in your directing? Or is that just how it is?
I confess to be a voyeur, a peeping Tom. If it wasn't a bad image, the peeping Tom. I'm a voyeur. I like to look at things. I like to explore with my gaze things and surfaces, I would say. So probably that comes. It's my unhinged look on things that comes off, as people say, sensual. Probably. It's not something like that is decided beforehand. It's more about, like it's a movie about youth, and it's a movie about summer, and it's a movie about the laziness of summer and heat, meaning the heat of summer. Mm-hmm. So people are naked, people lounge.
Mm-hmm. But there's also, I mean, when Oliver eats the soft boiled or the hard boiled egg, and he cracks into it. I found something very sexual about the way he eats the egg. I found something very sexual about the way they eat peaches. This is even before the moment where young Elio has sex with a peach. I mean, was there an intentional sexualizing of objects that could be non-sexual?
No, it was Epicurean. They come in. He comes in this place. He's a guy from America, and he finds himself into this mansion that is crumbling. It's not a rich estate. It's an old house, and he sees the generosity of the environment, both the human environment and the natural environment, and he eats the egg because he's invited to the feast.
But it's the way he eats the egg. Maybe, I mean, obviously...
You should ask Army.
Obviously, I'm reading too much into it. Maybe
you should ask Army.
Or maybe I'm...
Army likes eggs a lot.
Sure, but he clips out the top of the egg and he digs in. It seemed very sexual to me. But that wasn't
But we didn't do a close-up of that.
All right, okay. And when we're seeing the peach emoji being used on social media by fans of the film, how do you feel about that?
I don't do social media, so you are telling me. I don't know.
You didn't know until I told you just then?
Yeah. I don't know.
So in the reviews of the film, people are using the peach. Are you worried that scene is going to get too much attention?
No, I think that
this is the scene where
the final cut of a movie. It's in the hands of the audience. They do the final cut.
Is that challenging? Is that challenging to let something go like that?
I'm 46 and I was a control freak until I decided not to be anymore a control freak. And when I decided that, you let it go, I feel much better and I have more control.
Well, what made you learn that? What did you have to do to learn that?
Experience, anxieties, too much anxiety.
Trust? Did you have to trust your audience?
I trust my audience. Yeah, I trust audiences because I am an audience member myself. I grew up watching movies. I grew up buying tickets to see films. Like a place like TIFF, for me, it's like paradise because you remember when I was going to festivals before being a filmmaker and watching 50 movies in 1 week, every movie I could. Audience is fantastic, but it's fantastic not as a sort of catalog of consumerism. An audience is an organism of intelligence, a collective intelligence that is made out of individual intelligence, and that's fantastic. And I think audiences are much more ahead of what, unfortunately, often are being fed with.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the intelligence of the audience. One thing I noticed is that you don't show any of the explicit sex scenes in the film. There are beautiful shots that just roll over to the window and we are to use our imagination. Can you tell me about that decision?
Because I think, again, the movie was about the capacity of welcoming one another in one another's arms. But what to gain from the physical sex between the two men seen on screen? Literally, what? I asked myself, I have no problem in shooting a sex scene and having a very explicit one, men and women, whatever, but I was asking myself, what really, really do we gain from that?
And what did you land on?
And I realized that we would have not gained anything. We would have just be kind of morbid. Like in A Bigger Splash, for instance, you have the beginning of the movie opens with Marianne Lane and Paul making sex in the pool. But that is very important that you see that, because you are soaking yourself into their privacy, intimacy in an environment that later will become crucial to the destruction of their lives and the destruction of their paradise. So that's why that scene you had to see. Maybe in a sequel of Call Me By Your Name, we will show a very explicit sex scene between two men, if that will drive the behavior of the characters into the audience mind in a way that is meaningful.
It's interesting, Stevie. When you look at literature, oftentimes sex scenes are described with 3 asterisks. You know, they you know what I'm talking about. They lay in bed, star, star, star. The next morning when they woke up, we tend to think of these moments as prudish when they just use stars instead of describing the actual sex. But I find this interesting that you're saying that it can actually be quite more meaningful not to show the sex scene at all.
Yeah, and by the way, they are part of, at that moment, Oliver and Elio are part of the nature. So the trees are as sexual as them. Like Hitchcock, I think he never shot any sex scenes, but every film that he made is an eruption of sexuality and eroticism. So I think I like to find things in the place that are not obvious.
So things can be sexual without them showing them at all. They can be more sexual by not showing them.
Yeah, I think if you want to show sex on screen, it has to do with behavior. It has nothing to do with just looking at people having sex. That's boring.
That's beautiful. I'm speaking with Luca Guadagnino, director of the film Call Me By Your Name, the story of so many different things, but including 2 young men who fall in love over the course of the summer in northern Italy and the early 1980s. And I think that we talked a little bit more about this earlier, that teenage love can be treated as puppy love, lighthearted, inconsequential. And you treat the relationship that Oliver and Elio do with so much gravity. Talk to me a little bit more about that. The idea of how you had to treat their love as a director to make it seem not inconsequential.
Well, I definitely had the great help of Armie Hammer and Timothée Chalamet, but I would say the entire cast, Esther Garel. Let's not forget that in the movie, Elio body is exploding in any direction, so he has this attraction for this girlfriend that has been his friend since they were kids, but also he cannot stop by wanting to go toward the young man that just arrived. Armie Hammer played Oliver. I think that we really were open. We were really open to to show the intimacy of the 2 boys. And I discussed a lot with both of Armie and Timmy. And, for them, sometimes during the filming, the idea of doing a scene like the kissing scene, the beginning of the sex scene, sounded a bit like a sort of like a cliffhanger, like we have to overcome that and then we would have done the big thing. And I tried to make them understand that wasn't the point. The point was, the real cliffhanger was to show the intimacy. So for me, the most difficult scenes, the scenes that were more complicated to shoot, were the ones in which, after they have sex for the first time, they build their intimacy.
See, they would think that was easy, and the hard part would be the actual lovemaking, the actual kissing.
Exactly,
right?
And in fact, I remembered something that I read in an interview to the great Italian filmmaker Bernardo Bertolucci. When he said that when he shoots a movie, he's not only making a story about the characters that he's depicting, but he's also making a sort of documentary on the actors who are playing their characters.
Wow.
So, that was particularly in a reference to Marlon Brando's performance in Last Tango in Paris. And in fact, if you see the film, you will realize that there is as much as Brando as of the character that he plays. And in fact, Brando, when the movie became what it became, was so upset with Bertolucci. He said, "You stole my soul with your camera." I tried to do that as well, but not in a obtrusive or sneaky way. I am very open, but I am not gonna be happy, and I'm not gonna give up until I see a complete surrender from the performers to the camera, in order for the camera to be able to make both the storytelling and the X-ray of who they are. So when we got that, we got these great performances, and we got this invisible force that is the intimacy between Timothy, Elio, and Oliver.
The film, I don't want to give anyone the impression that the intimacy and the sex that we've been talking about is only what the film is about. And the reason I said earlier that the film is about many things, but it's also about young men in the summer of northern Italy, is that Elio's father is such a beautiful and central narrative of the film. This is a man who cares a great deal for his son. This is a man who, as we mentioned earlier, treats his son's emotions, which parents have a tendency to treat young love as kind of inconsequential. He treats it with a lot of sensitivity and a lot of maturity. And you've said that Call Me By Your Name is an homage to the fathers you've known in your life. How so?
Well, what's the thing that strikes me most about the book is the way Aciman created this fantastic character of the Professor Perlman, and how his position in the reality is the one of someone who is so generously open, like a sponge, soaking and then releasing knowledge.
Right, because he's observing their relationship quietly, and you almost never hear from him throughout the film except for this big, beautiful
But if
monologue.
you see the movie carefully, you'll see that Michael Stuhlbarg's performance is so deeply rooted in really gently soaking himself with the love of these two. So for me, the movie eventually, it's a movie about the beauty of the transmission of knowledge, the beauty of passing the witness to the younger of experience, to growing up and morphing into something else in the dialogue with the other. In this particular sense, the concept of the father and son conversation being such a very deeply open conversation may sound utopic, but our cinema should be utopic. I mean, I guess that there are less parents like the parents in Call Me By Your Name than the ones in the movie, but yet I think that the one in the movie are in the great Hollywood sense what could be, let's say, a way for a real happy ending. So for me, this is, above all, it's a family movie. It's a movie about family, about how family is a healthy organism, and it's an organism for becoming.
Luca, in going into the Toronto International Film Festival, your film's being compared a lot to a big film at the Toronto International Film Festival last year of Moonlight, which ended up winning Best Picture. Have you heard any of those comparisons?
They flatter me, of course. I think Moonlight is a beautiful movie, and yeah, I mean, you read press about your work sometimes.
Do you?
So you sometimes something happens to people.
Yeah.
But it's we made this movie with the most light and simple approach. One camera, one lens, 30 days of shoot, one location near my home. Super simple, low key, super small budget, nothing exotic. I was preparing in the meantime a bigger movie, Suspiria, which is the movie I am just finishing now. We edited very fast, and then we presented to Sundance. That was the only place that I felt I wanted to show the movie in the first place, and I was very happy that they said yes. And then the movie in Sundance clicked with the audience. It was extraordinary. But those are things you can't control. You can only enjoy and be grateful for this kind of reactions.
Was it surprising at all? I mean, are you surprising when you hear that it's getting Oscar buzz, that it could go for Best Picture? Is this wow? You're grimacing. You're listening to the radio. You're grimacing.
I don't know. I don't want to go there.
I understand that. I mean, the question. Listen, the question I'm not asking you.
I think there is an Oscar-deserving thing in this movie, above everything else, that is the great songs of Sufjan Stevens. That I can say.
Yeah, they are beautiful.
I say it out loud, and even if it's crass, I say that because Sufjan work in the song writing and performing, it's astonishing. And I dared to approach this great artist because I felt that I wanted to have another voice to be added to the voice of the characters. And I said to him, I'd like you to... I asked him to be the narrator of the movie. And there was a narration in the script that we removed completely. He said, I'm not going to do that. And I said, but would you do a song that is in a way a sort of narration? And he thought about it. And then he came back to me and he said, okay, I come back to you in 2 months. And 2 months later, we receive from the management of Sufjan 2 songs instead of 1.
2 original songs.
And we were in Crema with the actors. We were probably 1 week into shooting, and we played the song in my living room, and it was like, oh, fuck, it was beautiful, beautiful. I think that from the trailer, people has listened to part of Mystery of Love, but there is also Vision of Gideon, and also he made an arrangement for piano for a very beautiful song that is already pre-existing called Futile Devices. It's beautiful. The work of Sufjan, it's fantastic. So I want everything for this. Everything that can be a testament of the greatness of this artist.
I really appreciate your answer on that. I know it's not comfortable when you're asked about, do you want an Oscar, or how does it feel? Because that can't possibly go into your filmmaking.
No, it doesn't. I want porcelains. So maybe if Oscar brings porcelains. That's silly, sorry.
I want to ask you about one last scene before we go, and you've been really generous with your time.
Anything. Go ahead.
The most moving part of the film for me was the way you ended it. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I'll say in the last 2 minutes, and this is as the credits roll, Timothée Chalamet, who plays Elio, 17-year-old, delivers a performance that tells us as much about him as anything in the previous 130 minutes. I've never seen credits that I've really had to stick around for. Now, people have disagreed with me and say there's credits in the past that you have to stick around for. But it feels like the weight of everything he experienced in that film comes across while the credits are rolling. Tell me about that scene, filming that scene.
Oh, it was great. We shot the scene in sequence. So more or less it was from A to Z as for the script. So that was almost... I think that was the previous to the last day of shooting, because we had to shoot Bergamo when they go in the village as the last thing for problems of location and organization. The scene of the ending was almost the last, but not the last. There is a movie by Paul Schrader, who I'm so happy that he's back with a new movie now that was in Venice. I think it's in here too. And he's a filmmaker that I revere, one of the great intellectuals of American cinema. There is a movie he made, I think, in the 90s with Susan Sarandon and oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of a great actor. The movie is called The Light Sleeper. It's about this drug dealer who ends up in jail, and there is this final shot, which is an uncut shot of his close-up. And the credits roll.
Willem Dafoe.
Sorry, William Dafoe, you are fantastic. And I wanted to pay homage to that. But you pay homage to something so complicated only if you have someone as great as Timothée Chalamet.
It happens as he gets the call that this idyllic, beautiful, sensual experience that he's had, that reality has set in, that reality has come to him, and these things that he remembers and he'll remember forever, the reality of actual life comes to him, and just to watch him weep in front of the fireplace feels like he's weeping for the banality of life itself. And I started weeping as well.
Good. Thank you for weeping.
But am I off in my interpretation of that scene?
Any interpretation that is generous and heartfelt, it's great. So I like what you said.
So yes, I'm off.
No, you're right.
I appreciate that. Luca, thank you so much for coming in and talking today.
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed talking to you.
Me too.